Lesson 14 is on solving inequality. So we've spent the last couple lessons, we've done some solving, but we were focusing on what does it mean to be an inequality? What does solutions of an inequality look like? And now we're really going to focus on the solving. So let's start solving some inequalities. Now, I want you guys to realize, with the exception of one little thing, solving inequalities is the exact same thing as solving equations. Okay, so let's pretend that this right here is an equal sign. Okay, so if this is an equal sign right here, what are we solving for? Well, I'm solving for n, so I need to solve for the n term first. Remember, order of operations backwards, so we deal with adding and subtracting first. So if I'm subtracting 8, I want to get rid of it by doing its inverse or its opposite, adding 8. Whatever I do to one side of the equal sign, I do to the other. I bring down my n divided by 2. I double check here. Minus 8 plus 8, that's 0. In this case, I'm bringing down my equal sign. And then notice right here, we have a negative 17 plus 8. Now, use a calculator. If your struggle is adding integers, we need to work on it. But don't make that hold you back for solving these equations. So that's negative 9. Okay? So now I've solved for the n term. Now I need to solve for the n. Now, notice this is division. How do we undo division? Multiplication. So I'm going to multiply each side by 2. So right here, you notice how I write it? I just write it to make it equal, right? These 2's cancel out. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 2 divided by 2 is 1. Got a whole bunch of 1's and the n. So n equals negative times a positive is a negative. 9 times 2 is 18. Okay? But remember, this wasn't an equal sign. It was an inequality. Okay? So bring down our greater than sign, and our answer is also greater than. Now, the trick is right here. See how we multiplied by a positive 2? Okay. The only thing that changes is when you multiply or divide by a negative number. Okay. You can multiply or divide by positives, the sign stays the same. Remember, preserved or reversed? But if you multiply by or divide by a negative, that's when we reverse the sign. Okay. So let's look over here. We're going to treat it just like an equation. So what are we solving for? We're solving for x. This is negative 9 times x. So I'm going to solve for that term right there. Okay? So again, if you need to, draw the lines around the inequality symbol. Okay? This is minus 8. So I'm going to add 8. Now, if you did keep change and made that a negative 8, what do we combine with a negative 8 to go to 0? A positive 8. Plus 8, positive 8. Whatever we do to one side, we do to the other. Okay, did not realize how similar these problems were. I bring down my negative 9x, negative 8, positive 8. That cancels to give me 0. I bring down my inequality. Let me erase these lines out of here just so we can see something. And negative 17 plus 8, guess what? It is still a negative 9. Okay, excuse me. Now, this is multiplied by a negative 9, so we do the inverse of the opposite. We undo multiplication with division. Now I need to divide by a negative 9. If I divide by a positive 9, I get negative 9 divided by positive 9, which is a negative 1x. Again, excuse me. I don't want a negative 1x. Therefore, I need to divide by a negative 9, because a negative 9 divided by a negative 9 is 1x. All right, whatever I do to one side, I do the other. Negative 9 divided by negative 9 is a positive 1. Now, the only thing that is different from an equation to inequality is when you divide or you multiply by a negative number, you reverse the inequality. So instead of less than, it becomes greater than. Okay? That's the only difference. Other than that, you already know how to solve inequalities. Okay? So let's look at an example. All right, so the annual county carnival is being held this summer. The annual county carnival is being held this summer, will last 5.5 days. So we want to use this information on the next couple problems here. You are the owner of the biggest and newest roller coaster called the Gentle Giant. It costs $6 to ride. Now, the operator of the ride has to pay $200 per day. We've talked about that. When you see the word per, for each, for every, that's the hint that we're going to be multiplying, right? Multiplying 200 by the number of days. So we have to pay $200 per day plus $65 per day for safety inspection. Okay? If you want to make a profit of at least $1,000 each day, what is the minimum number of people that must ride the roller coaster? Now I need to go back. These are both per day here. I'm going to take back what I said before because I should have read the full question before I went back to figure that out. Learn from my mistakes. Because this right here, each day. We just want to know what it is per one day. Okay? So we need to know the minimum number of people that must ride the roller coaster to make at least $1,000. Now, write an inequality. It's going to be expected that you guys write inequalities, not just figure out answers. So we need to make a minimum of $1,000. Okay? So that's going to be my total there. And this is per day. So how many people must ride the roller coaster each day? If it costs $6 to ride, remember we're negating what I said earlier? That means if one person rides, it's $6. If two people ride, that's $12. If three people ride, that's $18. If 10 people ride, that's $60, right? So my profit is going to be 6 times the number of people who ride. If I have 1,000 people ride, that's 6 times 1,000. That's $6,000. Awesome. Except I have to pay that $200 that day. And I have to pay that $65 that day. Again, it's per day, right? And we're only worried each day. This right here has to be at least $1,000. So, can it be more than 1,000? Do I want to make more than 1,000? Yeah. So we're going to say it's greater than 1,000. Now, can it be equal to 1,000 if we want to make at least $1,000? At least $1,000? Would I be happy with 1,000? Yes. So I need this to be greater than or equal to 1,000. Now, let's solve. Guess what the first thing I'm going to do is? I know I'm going to have to simplify, so I'm going to change these to addition. Instead of saying minus 200, I'm going to say plus a negative 200. Instead of saying minus 65, I'm going to say plus a negative 65. And the reason I do that is because now I can combine my like terms. Okay, again, if you need a calculator, take it. If we simplify negative 200 plus negative 65, that's a negative 265, which is greater than or equal to 1,000. Okay, if you can get here, solve this just like an equation. Simplify and solve. So what am I solving for? My unknown here, p. So I'm going to solve for my p term. Deal with the addition and subtraction first, order of operations backwards. So since we're adding this negative 265, and I want that to go away because I want to get p all by itself over here, I could think of it as subtracting a negative 265, but I'm going to end up the same way if I do this, but I'm going to think negative 265, what can I combine with that? Oh yeah, a positive 265. Doesn't that give us 0? But if I add 265 to one side, I've got to do it to the other. All right, so I bring down my 6p. 6 times p, that's what that means. That gives me 0. Bring down my inequality, greater than or equal to 1,265. Now, this is 6 times p. We undo multiplying with dividing. So I'm going to divide by 6. Whatever I do to one side, I do the other. 6 divided by 6 is 1p. Grab my calculator here, and I get 1,265 divided by 6. And I get 210.83 with the 3 repeating. What are we going to do with that? Well, I'm going to wait a second. I'm going to come back to that in a second. Before, the last thing I do when I solve an inequality is I ask myself this question. Did I multiply or divide by a negative number? Don't say, yeah, well, I multiplied. No. I know I multiplied or divided. Was it by a negative number? Nope, this was a positive number. All right, inequality stays the same. Okay? Same. If this was a negative 6, then we would reverse it. Okay, so we're not going to take one person and cut them into 0.83 repeating to make it exact, right? But if I round this down to 210, it's not quite enough money. So I really need to say P is greater than or equal to 211 people. Okay? Or you can say we need 211 people or more to ride. Oh, here I go struggling with right again. 2 more to ride the roller coaster. Let me squeeze that in, right? Okay. Because 210 is not going to be, we're going to be short because we need more than 210. We've got to round that up, so we have to cut a percent to 211. How bad does that sound? Okay. All right. So as we're working on solving inequalities, writing and solving inequalities, keep in mind our goal, of course, is we don't have just one answer. Okay. Notice when I wrote the answer here, I didn't just write 211. You have to include the inequality because it's not 211. It's 211 or more. So our answers need to start looking like this and not just one number.